Hello friends and welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. I'm really glad you're here. If you're new here, my name is Becca. This channel is all about my love for spinning, knitting, weaving, sewing, crocheting, all the fiber things. I invite you to grab whatever project you have on the go and join me. Let's make some stuff. At the start of each of my videos, I always say that this channel is in part because of my love of weaving, but I think I haven't mentioned anything about weaving, or very little, to this point. So we're going to change that today. I'm really excited to tell you about a new project that I am planning. This is a big sort of long-term project. But before we get into that, I want to start with what I'm wearing. This sweater is a sweater that I actually made for my husband many years ago, and he doesn't wear it. I'll tell you about that in just a moment. But first I want to tell you a little bit about the sweater. This is a sweater from Elsebeth Lavold, the designer Elsebeth Lavold, in her book called the Embraceable You collection. And she did a really cool thing with this book. It is, all of the patterns are designed around a specific yarn. She's got a designer's choice line of yarns that is Angora. So she decided to contrast the softness and the delicacy of Angora yarn with patterns that are all evocative about armors from different parts of the world. This particular pattern is a men's sweater called Aries, and she uses a combination of knit and purl stitches to create an all-over textured pattern in the main body, and then along the shoulders and the elbows and the neck there are these purl bumps or ridges, and in between each of those is a couple of rows of knit stitches, plain knitting, in a contrasting color of yarn. So I did not use the yarn that was called for in the book. I also didn't use an Angora yarn for this. This was yarn that I purchased from Hobby Lobby, which is a big craft store chain in the United States. It is called I Love This Wool, which is almost 100% wool. I think there might be some acrylic in there as well. I don't remember what the gray variegated, it's a single ply on the variegated, I don't remember what that one was called, but mostly it is a wool sweater. It's very soft. Again, this has been several years ago, so the yarn I think is discontinued, but if you can find it, it is very nice. It's held up really well over these years, and so I would recommend the yarn if you can find it. So as I said, I made this sweater for my husband, but he doesn't wear it. And that is because, again, many years ago, I didn't have all the library of techniques available to myself in terms of casting on and casting off and those sorts of things. So the neck edge cast off is actually less stretchy than the rest of the sweater. And so it's big enough for me, but he doesn't want to pull it over his head because he's afraid that the yarn is going to snap. And I've just never gotten around to pulling it out and using a different cast off. So it's a little bit big. I mean, it was quite a bit big for me. The shoulders and the elbows don't fit in the right spaces, and I have to roll the cuffs up on the sleeves because they're too long. It fits more like a tunic. But it's very cozy, very soft, and I do love this sweater. He thinks it's very beautiful, but again, he's afraid to mess up the sweater that I made by wearing it. So that's what I'm wearing. And next, in case any of you are following along, I have made a lot of progress on my winter knitting project. This is the orange Albertine jacket from Sidsel Hoivik, who is a Norwegian knitwear designer. I have almost completely finished the body. I've already done the casting off for the neck, so this is knitted in the round. It is a cardigan pattern, so knitted in the round. It will be steeked down the front, and then there are steeks for the arms, and I've cast off the center front neck, and am now at the part where I have to knit and purl back and forth. Purling in stranded knitting is a little bit tricky, so it's going a little bit slower, and I'm hopeful that my tension isn't dramatically different compared to all of the knitting in the round, but I think it will be okay. It's just a few rows from where the neck ends, around and round, or around and back, and then you cast off a little bit at the back, and then you do finish up one shoulder and then the other. So only a few more rows to go on that. The next steps will be to do the sleeves, and then this pattern, which is so amazing, is actually knit the entire thing with just 2 colors of yarn, the orange and the white, and then at the end you go back and add all of these embellishments and duplicate stitch to make the patterns really pop. And so I have no idea how long that's going to take. It has a special medallion in the back, center back, at the top, so that's all going to have duplicate stitch around it. And then there's a bunch of beading and other embellishments that go into this pattern. So maybe I'll get it done in the winter, maybe not. But so far, so good, making lots of progress. Now let's talk weaving. I have a big long-term project that I have been dreaming about and thinking about, and have recently started the very first step. This project is going to combine several different crafts into a single project. So basically what I want to do is spin some yarn to weave into fabric to sew into a garment. And I've just now started on the spinning, but first I want to tell you about my loom. So this is a Kromski Harp Forte rigid Heddle loom. It comes in, I'll tell you the details of mine, and then some of the other options that are available. So this one is the widest one that they sell. It is 32 inches wide weaving width, but they also sell it in an 8, 16, and 24 inch width. So that is the maximum width of fabric that you can make. The actual dimensions are slightly larger. You can get it in a clear finish. I have the walnut finish, and I really love the dark brown wood. It has a folding mechanism for storage, which I haven't used yet, but it does, since I don't have as much space in my house for a thing like a big floor loom, this rigid Heddle loom was just perfect. It's big enough to make actual fabric and not just small things like scarves and placemats and tea towels, but yet small enough that it doesn't take up an entire room. It does have an integrated floor stand, which I think is a separate purchase. This loom was a birthday gift to me from my wonderful husband, who always knows how to encourage my crafting hobbies. And while I was resistant at first to the idea of adding yet another craft to my very long list, I've always been really interested in weaving. And so I was very excited to get this as a gift. The Harp Forte comes in, as I said, several different sizes. It also comes with everything you need to get started right away. So it is a rigid Heddle loom. You can get Heddles in a variety of sizes of dents or threads per inch. It comes default with the 8 dent Heddle, and it came with one. I have since gotten a second Heddle, so when I feel more confident, I can try using 2 rigid Heddles on the same project. I'm not there yet. This is a new skill for me. It comes with a single pickup stick and also 2 long stick shuttles, which are perfect for the size of loom. I'm assuming that the smaller looms will come with smaller stick shuttles. You can also buy additional Heddles, additional pickup sticks, all of these things separately. It also comes with a threading hook, which was really handy. And one of the cool things about the Kromski Harp Forte loom is that on the underneath side, or the back side of the loom, there are holes for pegs to make a built-in warping board. It also comes with a single peg and a clamp so that you can do your warping, direct warping that way if you prefer. So that is the Kromski Harp Fort Rigid Heddle loom in the 32-inch size. As I said, this was a fairly new thing for me, and so I have woven up 2 projects so far. on this loom, and I'm going to tell you about those now. The first project that I made on the Kromski Harp Forte loom was this scarf. This is a commercial yarn, 100% superwash wool. It is a yarn that I have had in my stash for ages and ages. I got it at a discount shop. It's probably discontinued, but it's called Lima, and the yarn maker is Fibra Natura. I got several balls from my discount shop in these two different colors, which I think are really cute together. This one I would call burnt orange, but they call it red, and then this one that they call brown is more of like a dusky brown, maybe a little bit of hints of purple in it, but I thought they were really nice together. So I had this yarn in my stash, but I didn't really have much of a plan for it other than that I was going to make a scarf out of it. And so, not a woven scarf, but I had it there, and so I thought this would be perfect to try this out. If I completely make a disaster of it, at least I won't have wasted a lot of expensive yarn. So I, for this first project, used the warping board on the back of the loom and measured out a warp that I thought was about a nice generous scarf length. So it ended up being just over 6 feet long, and about 10 inches or so wide. I did the warp with mostly the orange color with a little stripe of a few strands of the brown, and then started with my weft in the orange. I did some additional yarn that I had just sort of laying around to start it off, which I've left in the scarf, and then just did the orange for a while, and occasionally I would switch to the brown and make these color blocks in sort of a random way. And so I think it turned out really great in what it looks like. Is it perfect? No, not at all. My beginning edges are quite messy while I was trying to figure out the tension and how to manage the selvage. I have a couple of floats that I missed here and there, but I think it's good enough and I wear it. It is, strangely, the yarn itself is fairly soft, but it's a little bit dense, a little bit rough in the hand, and I didn't do any finishing on this other than to tie off the ends into tassels and cut them all to the same length. I didn't do any wet finishing. This is straight off the loom. And so that was my first project on the rigid Heddle loom. I have a scarf and I wear it. For my next project, I also used a commercial yarn, 100% wool. I don't have any of the yarn left. Again, this was yarn that I hadn't purchased in my stash. I had 3 skeins of this wool. It's called the Croft by the West Yorkshire Spinners. I purchased from my local yarn shop without really a plan of what I was going to do with it. And so I thought this would be great to see if I can get any better. And again, I'm just doing plain tabby weave over under 1, and I'm using the same yarn for at least at the beginning, which I'll tell you in a second. I was planning to use the same yarn for the warp and the weft, so very balanced weave, just so I can practice getting the skill of how to do weaving on the rigid Heddle loom. And so I bought 3 of these skeins and didn't do any planning. I warped this one direct warp with the peg. I wanted to do a long warp, but I also wanted to do a wide fabric. As you can see, I succeeded in one and not the other. And so I didn't really measure how long it was going to be. Just tried to make a long fabric and was doing the direct warp. So I would loop around the peg and come back and thread through the Heddle each time until I ran out of the yarn with those 2 skeins. And so my 3rd skein I saved back for the weft. And was going along, everything was great. I then ran out of yarn much more quickly. Well, I ran out of yarn before I got to the end of the warp, and so I had some other yarn in my stash. This was Patons lace, mostly acrylic, a little bit of mohair, and a little bit of wool that I had tons of from a different project. It's much finer than the other wool, so I held this 2 strands at a time for the weft, but the colors were very similar. And so this first part is the balanced weave with a single speckled Croft yarn. And then a ways from the end, right here, was where I switched to the other. So I think they're both really beautiful. I think that they are, the mohair makes it a little bit fuzzier, which is nice, has a little bit more of a bloom to it. The colors matched perfectly with this gray, sort of shades of gray on white. And they're obviously different. You can see the line of where the speckles are and where the new weft is. But they coordinate really nicely. And I thought, well, it's not very wide, but I can always seam it. My goal was just to make fabric. My selvages are much neater. My tension is much better, and I actually did a wet finishing technique for this because I had heard that once you have the wool yarn especially stretched under tension on your loom, that it needs to be finished so that it will relax and have a nicer hand. And actually the finished fabric is really nice, soft, and really filled in all the gaps really nicely. So because I didn't measure this, I didn't plan it at all, it is way, way too long for a scarf, and yet not long enough or not big enough. Even if I seam it, I don't think I'll have enough for a full garment. And so I'm not sure what I'm going to make with it just yet. It's sitting folded up nicely of here's some fabric that I have made, waiting for the inspiration, but I will make something with it. So that was my second project that I made. And I'm really happy with how it turned out. So my next plan and my current project, both for spinning and for weaving, is to use my own hand spun yarn for a weaving project to make fabric, hopefully to make a garment. And so what I've used before was commercial knitting yarn. So I'm hopeful that my hand spun yarn will work in a similar way. I have this great wool, Tweedy wool blend. It is all wool, but I don't know the breed. This is from the Woolery, from their line called Rosie's Floral Wool Blend. This color is Hyacinth. They have a pink and a blue and various floral names. But this one is green with specks of light green, dark green, and sort of a olive fleck in the tweed. I am spinning this in my standard 2-ply woolen spun on my Ukrainian castle wheel. And I have some of it spun up, so this is what the spun yarn looks like. I have not set the twist on this, so it will bloom up a little bit, I think, before it's finished. But I have several bags of this yarn, or this wool, excuse me. I have several bags of this wool from the Woolery. Some of it has already been spun, and some of it is still in process. But that is my spinning plan. The weaving plan is going to be a plain tabby weave. Yet again, I'm not yet confident enough to try more complicated weaving techniques. But I'm planning to do the same yarn for the warp and the weft, as wide as I possibly can. But I don't know how long that will be. I was really inspired to do this from Sarah Howard on YouTube, who has a YouTube channel called Get Weaving with Sarah. She also has a series within that called Where You're Weaving, which she uses her own hand-spun yarn and makes weaving makes cloth out of her with her loom, rigid Heddle loom, small looms, and then she turns it into garments. So I'm thinking a simple top pattern would probably be what we'll go for. That of course depends on the yardage that I get out of the spinning, and then how the woven fabric ends up, what the qualities are of it, and how much of it I have, whether I'll be able to do that. I think I have enough wool to make a knitted sweater, so I probably have enough to make a woven fabric to make a sweater, but this is the first time I've done this, so I could be way off and maybe it will turn into a knitting project. But that's the fun of crafting. So that's my next project. As I said, I am in the process of spinning the yarn now, so come on, let's go and spin some yarn. That's it for this video. Are you learning a new craft this year? Or maybe some new techniques on the craft that you already know how to do? If so, I hope it's going well for you. Thank you so much for spending some of your creative time with me. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!